Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. As you can see, I have my friend Asia Raine with me today. I want to take a moment here and thank everybody for watching the first video that Asia and I just put out together. It has been very well received, and we are very appreciative and excited about that. I have had some comments via email asking what's going to happen with the church? What more can we do? How are they ever going to be brought down? And the truth is that we have made quite a bit of progress. When I first did my video with MK Ultra survivor Christy Allen, and you can go back into my videos and find that, it was met with mixed reviews. There were many people that had great compassion, concern for her. There were people who were in shock and disbelief. And then, of course, we have the trolls and haters. So at that time, 4.5 years ago, when this information was first coming out, it was a lot for people to wrap their heads around. And now, 4.5 years later, I think enough has happened where the kind of information from survivors like Asia and Christy and a handful of others is being more positively received because of the repetition. The numbers in the church are coming down. They're not growing like they were. So when wards and stakes are having to combine because membership is decreasing, this is a great sign, but it's not good enough. Knowing that the church has lied about its history, about its doctrine, its scriptures, this is not good enough. We have to expose church leaders all the way from the grassroots up to the first presidency for the lying, deceiving, human torturing, child abuse murderers that many of them are. They have been implicated over and over again. And if you look at the amount of survivors that are piling up, plenty of evidence is there. And so we have to keep going, and we have to keep moving forward and exposing them for the evil, pernicious deeds that they have participated in for many decades. So having said that, we are going to jump into today's material, which is going to be a little bit on the graphic side. So this is your one and only warning right up front. If you want to join us at another time, you may. But please know that we are going to be covering today's topic, which will be comparing Mormon ordinances, particularly the baby blessing and the baptism, side by side with Satanic ritual, which Asia has gone through. So please share this information. It's the only way it's going to get out. And having said that, welcome back, Asia.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back. It's really good to be here.
You have been really well received.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's actually great. Oh, wow. That's nice to hear.
I'm
Thanks.
excited. If you go back into the comments and you look, people are very appreciative and welcoming of this video. And I've received a number of emails talking about you as well as their own experiences. And so we may get to that point at some time, but I think change is happening.
That's so fantastic. It's actually really beautiful that you have had people reaching out and even feeling courageous enough to share some of their experience, if not all of what they remember, that kind of thing. There are so many programs that are active or latent that could be activated, that could discourage people from saying anything. And that's the whole point of it. That is what it's all about. And being in those circumstances and remembering those things actually does release that, which is really great. When I say being in those circumstances, being in a place where you feel courageous enough to actually go into your memories and remember things, or actively kind of pull from what you are conscious of already and then say something to somebody. So that's really cool. I'm glad that you're getting that kind of feedback. And I did read a few of the comments just the other day, and it was really nice. It was actually really nice to see the reception that was there. And I was reading a few that were kind of confused. They're like wanting some clarity, like, what does this mean? What was, it, and like you said, there's going to be all kinds of different responses to this, but I'm really glad to hear that the reception has been positive so far.
Well, I'm trying to answer what I can, and so in the comment section, but you're welcome to jump in there. So getting started with today's topic, what I'd like to do is just create an overview of what Satanism is.
Okay.
From your perspective.
Wow. Wow.
Small chunk.
Small chunk. Satan is basically, when you take Satanism from a religious standpoint, it's going to be very focused on the strength between Satan or Lucifer and Jesus and God. And it was illustrated to me and to the others that were always in ceremony over and over and over that Satan or Lucifer, in my experience, the title and the name were used kind of interchangeably, unless I was being married to Lucifer or unless they were worshiping Lord Lucifer. But there is the use of the word Satan a lot, just because that's what's in scriptures. And so really kind of connecting that and meshing that gives it more of a kind of a wider swath of effectiveness. But they're always demonstrating the strength of evil over the strength of God. And that in those demonstrations and in those ceremonies and in those, I want to call it play acting, but it's like that makes it sound kind of childish, and it's not. They put a lot of time and they put a lot of money and they put a lot of effort and organization into these ceremonies. Mm-hmm. To where they are going to be demonstrating that Jesus is weaker than Satan. And sometimes, you get to see a battle between the two, and other times you don't necessarily need to see a battle. You're just told that Satan won and Satan killed Jesus. And so now we're drinking his blood and eating his flesh, and the evidence is whatever's in front of you. And being in a drug state, like everyone always is, as far as the children especially, but when I know for some adults, especially non-consenting, they're also in a different state of mind. They're also in a drug state, that you are just taking the information in. Like it's all just being kind of forced into you and consumed, because you are in such a traumatic situation that naturally you're just gonna be very, very alert on one level, even if you're just very focused and drugged at another level. So it's like they utilize the ability of the human body and the spiritual aspects of who we are as souls to really drive this training in. And so when I talk about Satanism is as a combination of enlisting individuals to be on the side of Satan, to actually not trust God, not trust Jesus, to take away a person's freedom. So you're in essence creating a mind control slave. So they use a lot of the same techniques that were developed for like the MK Ultra program that were also there prior to. It's just they kind of merged together, and then they started really working well together with that. But it does involve human sacrifice. It involves animal sacrifice. It involves things that are like dedicated to worshiping Satan, worshiping Lucifer, and then calling in and calling up demons, and then also utilizing and consuming the life force energy of the people that they control. So, your spirit, your soul, you as a child, you as an adult, whatever. And it doesn't necessarily have to be done with even a blood sacrifice. There's a lot of violation that happens through rapes and through sodomy that is also part of the black magic that is utilized and used there.
Are you familiar with Panda Bear programming?
Actually, I'm not. I mean, I don't know of that with that name. So yeah, tell me about that.
That when you see marketing that uses panda bears, or you see the black eyes, which symbolize the panda bears, what they are referring to is sodomy of children,
Oh, wow.
because you've got the white face or the white bum with the
Hmm.
black eyes and the
Hmm.
sodomy, what it represents. And so a lot of this stuff that came out with that one, oh, and the name escapes me right now, that clothing company that was using, do you know what I'm talking about? And maybe somebody
Yeah.
can put it in the comments because the name escapes me right now.
Mhm.
It starts with a B or something like that. But they were using panda bears in their marketing, that type of stuff, with over sexualized children. So paired together, what that's saying is they're controlling these children through sodomy,
Absolutely.
represented via panda bear.
That the sodomy is going to be so key. It's a tool. I do want to really, like speak to the fact that sodomy is not necessarily present just for sexual gratification. It's a tool. So children are sodomized with or without a penis. They're sodomized with objects. They're sodomized in a number of different ways because of the way it actually works with um, the nervous system.
Yes.
So when that nervous system is activated and jarred in the way it does, and that object, really slams into or touches into the tailbone, and so when your nervous system, where you the end of your what is it? I'm like missing all the words here. So
Down in the sacrum.
in the sacrum, right? That's what I was looking for. So as a spinal column, where it ends and where it also goes to the brain stem, that whole system is being accessed and activated and traumatized by sodomy. And then it does create some a very specific reaction in the brainstem to open up and create spaces where different personalities can actually be created and deposited and then harbored in the brain. So it's done very specifically, and it's done on purpose. And it's also something that I want to kind of go back to this panda bear programming. My first thought when you were talking about that with the black eyes and the white face, there were so many times in my ceremonies or in my memories that somebody had either powdered their face white to change the appearance of it, or a lot of times when you're going through what you're going through, like I can't even tell you how many times in that drugging and what you're watching, you feel nauseated. And so you will see children that are very pale, and we are also typically either in a sheath or naked, and so you're going to be cold. And so there's a lot that does. That's just where my brain went. It's like that would remind me of the pale face or the paleness
Right.
of a child. And because it's always shadowed and dark, you're going to have those dark rings. You're not going to necessarily see their eyes unless they want you to see their eyes. And so to me, I can see a really very real crossover that would be triggering, in addition to the symbolism behind sodomy.
Well, there's a lot we could talk on that, I'm sure. So what I'd like to do is start with the baby blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you want to break that down. If you want to go over the Mormon ordinance of baby blessing versus whatever kind of ritual is done in order to bless
Sure.
the baby or indoctrinate it.
If you want to join in with me on just kind of what you remember or what you know of the regular Mormon baby blessing, like jump in. I know that when it has traditionally been done in the meeting house in front of everybody, and the whole idea is to present the child to the ward, and that the congregation that they are a member of, and then the father of the baby is, if he is a priesthood holder and worthy, then he is going to give the baby a blessing. So they call it giving them a name and a blessing. So he announces to the congregation the name of the child and then pronounces a blessing on the child. The ones that join him, they gather in front of the congregation up at the front,
Mhm.
and there's other men that are invited to be part of it, and they have to be priesthood holders. And those invitations were extended before the the blessing, basically. And then there is sometimes a very general offer. I've seen it before where they're like, if the ward or the branch is smaller, then they will invite worthy priesthood holders to come up. So you might not even have to be a family member. But in wards where there's a lot of family that's visiting to support this ceremony and this ordination, then there's typically enough men or priesthood holders that are in the family that they don't necessarily open it up to everybody. But then what will happen is the child is typically dressed in white.
I was going to say, dress for the ritual.
They're dressed for the ritual, and there's some tradition and a little bit of ceremony behind what the baby's going to wear at the baby blessing. I'm going to speak for myself on this. Whenever I had, my children, I started immediately thinking about what am I going to dress them in? How am I going to dress this baby? What would be appropriate for this baby? What do I feel inspired? There's a lot of times that grandmothers or mothers will crochet a little outfit, or you can get pretty elaborate with some of the baby, the blessing outfits, the gowns that are there. It's traditional to just have it be a gown, especially for the girls. I've seen boys blessed in white gowns. A lot of times a little white, it looks like a little white suit, a little white shirt and white pants. So it's all white. And then when the men are called up, the father will take the child up to the front, and then they will stand in a circle and they will hold the baby this way. So the father's holding the baby, and then the other men put their hands under his hands. And then there's a specific wording, a specific script that needs to be said at the beginning on how they are going to bless the baby. And then they call in by the name of Jesus Christ, and they do, other things that they're going to call this child, and how he or she will be known upon the records of the church and also in the community and society. But they make it very clear that it's going to be made, this is the name of the child on the records of the church. And after that, then the father gives short, long blessing, whatever it is that he wants to. I know a lot of women who will record the blessing, like they will be writing down what they hear their husband say, or somebody in the family will be writing down what the blessing is so that they can type it up later.
Which they all sound the same. All the dads end up saying basically the same thing.
That's been my experience too. It's pretty rare to hear something profound like you would expect to hear from a patriarchal blessing to come through. Sometimes it does. It just depends. The thing that I find interesting is this, and I don't, somewhere in there's this tradition of bouncing the baby, where they just they will bring the baby up and down like this. I was always told it's so that the baby will stay calm and feel like it's in some rocking motion. A lot of times it actually upsets the child because they can feel like they're dropping. Right. And so the child would cry during the blessing, or not. It really depends. And then after the blessing is done, then the dad will hold the baby up and kind of like present this baby to the congregation, and then they go and sit down. And notably, at least for me, as I was going on later in my healing, as I was noticing some of these blessings, it just hadn't really occurred to me until later that the baby blessing is performed before before formal meeting ordinances, or so they'll have an opening prayer for sacrament meeting, and then they'll do this baby blessing before they even start into much else. So it's kind of part of the ward announcements, and then it's kind of like this separate, it's like a separate entity, a separate thing had just happened. and now they're going to go on with the meeting. So I don't know, I just found that to be really interesting, because it's done before the sacrament, it's done before all kinds of other things. So
Do you think there's meaning in that?
I do think there's meaning in that. And I think it has everything to do with structure that I don't necessarily have details on right now, but I did find it interesting. So, I mean, I'm not going to claim anything at this moment, but I do feel like there's something about that. And if somebody has any kind of ideas or inclinations of knowing that, if there's something there, that'd be interesting to me.
Okay.
So
Did you ever go through a satanic baby blessing or any type of ritual there?
I did, yeah. So in mine, the ritual was done it's in the family, and notably speaking to, if on the surface level, you know, in a regular Mormon baby blessing, if somebody, it used to be, I don't know, I mean, since post-COVID, I don't know what the rules are now, but it used to be that you had to receive or get special permission from the bishop to have a baby blessing at your home, because sometimes that did happen, right?
Yes.
They had to go through whatever they went through to get special permission to do that. For me, the blessing was done in a private home, and it was done in my great aunt's home, and I was taken there. I'd been prepared, and whatever the preparation was more of a more of a soothing preparation, kind of like, I would call it a drugging, but it was to keep me quiet, not for any other reason. Like I don't think that it was meant to like really disorient me, but
So
it
you
was
were drugged as an infant.
often. Yeah, no, that's just
A
something
given.
it's a given. You're going to be
Okay.
drugged no matter what. Well, I got to retract that. Some people don't necessarily have to be drugged as they get further into certain things because they dissociate so well and so fast. But somewhere in there, there's going to still be drugs introduced. It helps create the whole scenario.
I would imagine they learn their children very early on as to who's going to disassociate, who doesn't, and how easy or difficult of a process it might be for you. Because some people won't disassociate and some will. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, easier than others. And you are going to, it's kind of like they go after I want to call it the low hanging fruit. So there's training that goes along with infants to get a child to dissociate. You are tested later to see how fast and how easily or readily you dissociate or not. And for the ones that don't dissociate as easily as the others, that kind of directs the training on who's going to be like kind of funneled into the system. So in mine, when I was taken to this baby blessing, I was placed on, I want to say that I was placed on kind of there was an ottoman, I guess is what it was, like an ottoman that had been draped with like a covering that was like a pentagram. And the thing that I noticed as an infant, as I was pulling this memory forward, the first thing that I was noticing were all these black candles. And so they had placed black candles around the room in certain places. And they had also had a kind of a pre-blessing. I don't want to call it a session, but it was like they had gone through their own preparations of what they were getting ready to do and who they were dedicating me to, that kind of thing. And there were both men and women present, and both men and women with robes and hoods on. So it wasn't just a male thing. It was like, you know, women and men both together. It was something that I would say was a little more closely associated with what they would do as a prayer circle in the temple, where it was like man, woman around that. And then I was placed on this ottoman, and the candles, there were candles around me that way. And this is why I probably had to be so still, so that I wouldn't like interrupt anything, because there were going to be there were other elements there. I think there was like a dish that had blood in it and a dish that had water in it. And I don't know the meaning of the chanting, but there was chanting. So they started in with chanting. And instead of really being held and bounced, it was more of a static thing. So there wasn't necessarily the tactile. And then through the chanting, then that was the dedication. I wasn't blessed with a particular name. I was blessed to Satan. I was blessed to serve Satan. So in a way, like the identification of the person isn't really even acknowledged. It's just a soul that's given over.
Okay. So there's an entirely different purpose behind it.
For what I remember, yeah, there was a different purpose behind that. And the dedication was definitely to that God, as they saw it. I also
Instead of being a child of God, you're now a child of Satan.
Correct. Yeah. From infancy. So you dedicated that way.
Now, of course, you were pulling this memory out as a small infant. Were you ever required to participate in that type of ceremony as you were growing up? So as a small child, because when we do baptisms for children at the local church house, we're so excited to see our friends have turned 8 and we go support them in their baptisms. Were you ever involved in any of those types of ceremonies for babies that had been brought into your area, whether you were a small child or an adult?
There were ceremonies that I was involved in that I wouldn't necessarily qualify it as a baptism, or excuse me, as a blessing. However, it was a blessing in a way. It was more of a dedication, I would call it that. So when those happened, the ones I remember weren't at a private home. They were more at a ceremonial spot. And these experiences ranged anywhere from dedicating a child to being a sacrifice. And then there was others that were other baptisms, and there were like being married to Lucifer. Like most of these ceremonies that I can remember, there were always other children present. I have a handful of ones where that's not the case. It was just conditioning that I was present for, or it was a ceremony or a torture and a rape that it was just about it was just about me. So the torturing and the conditioning was effectively being done on and to me. But I also want to say it was, in some of them, it was almost like that was already scheduled. I was going to be showing up, and they would, how do I want to say this? It's almost like they would, just tell other men or people, it's like, hey, we've got a ceremony today. If you want to come, like, I feel like some of those ceremonies that I was being raped in, and it was just a gang rape. It was almost like, we've got a ceremony if you want to attend, kind of thing.
Whoever shows up gets to have a bit of this child.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I know that does happen. And I know that some of them are private and it's invitation only. And the reason I'm bringing this in here is I want people to understand that it can be just kind of like a really offensive free for all, just kind of like, well, I'm in the mood, I want to go do this. And you can, you can show up to that if you are made aware that that's part of it, or you can be made aware that something's going to be happening. And this happened to me a few times where my dad was made known that something was going to be going on. And he took me just to have me in the space to be terrorized and be conditioned. So it's a conditioning opportunity. It was a programming opportunity that definitely had purpose in driving in my own programming, setting him in a particular role of authority, and trust. And then he had more information to manipulate me with. So it serves purposes in a lot of different ways to inform whoever is in that local brotherhood, or I mean, whatever, who was on the calling tree or whatever, however they communicated, to let them know that there is going to be a ritual, there is going to be a ceremony. This was an infant one. This is going to be a murder because somebody tried to leave. This is, like, they will go down through what it is if it's kind of an open ceremony that you can attend. And
Wow.
kind of thing, yeah.
That's a lot. We talked a little bit about a particular ceremony that you went through when you were 3. The LDS Church doesn't have this type of ceremony or ritual for comparison, but I think it's important for us to cover it. So do you mind sharing that situation?
Yeah, I would be happy to. This happened. The reason I'm bringing it forward like at 3 is because in the programming, again, you have a window, especially for the sodomy, up until about 6 years old, that really like opens up and helps create training, programming, and conditioning for a child to be mind controlled, to become a slave, and to have different personality parts. But then also introducing a child at certain ages to the regularness of what this is. So at 3 years old, I was taken to a ceremony where I was basically the symbol of innocence, and I was set on this golden disc, and then the disc was set on a pentagram in the floor. And this was it was interesting because of the way the floor was designed. I just remember thinking that I was sitting on hot lava, because there was like lights, or there was some kind of a glowing that was coming through like these cobblestones. And I can't see coming through. It may have just been like, I don't know, some reflective paint, and there's, something like that could have been created. But I do know that I remember seeing that I could see these lights, like the light was coming up, and it was also terrifying to me. But in this particular ceremony, I was sitting in the middle of this disc, and I had a couple of little like I had a little dish, and it had blood in it, and I was chewing on something, and I knew it was like flesh. I was chewing on human flesh, and I was also sick to my stomach about that. It was gross. I had to have this meat in this other little dish, and in a way I had to cut it. I mean, not that a 3-year-old could really cut that, but I had like an instrument where I could like stab it, and I was told to eat it, and I was in such a zoned out state that my focus was very, very narrow. And so I was in really kind of a hypnotic like daze. And so I was chewing on this and chewing on this. And then they started saying words like, take, eat, this is my body. And then take, eat, this is my blood. So they started talking and using the scriptural references to the blood of Jesus Christ and the body of Jesus Christ. And at one point, I was also handed, it was basically like sinew, I guess is what they were referring to it as. And I had to chew on and eat that as well. And so basically what they were saying was that Jesus was telling us to take his body and eat it, and take his blood and drink it. And I'm actually reading my notes here. It's like,
actually, if you could lift that bad boy up and show everybody what you've got.
This is one.
That's incredible.
Notebook.
Tell everybody what that is.
So this is actually how I helped myself heal. This is my sessions. This is verbatim, basically. So what I would do is I would go to my therapy sessions, and I tape recorded them. And then I would go home, and like starting the next day, probably for about 5 or 6 days after I put the kids to bed, then I would transcribe them. So I was then now listening. So when I was in session, I could be present and be in the memory recovery part without worrying if I could remember it or not. So I had it recorded, and then I would go back and I would transcribe, which meant I was witnessing it. So I'm listening and witnessing myself. And then I was actually recording it, which meant that I was validating it too. And I did this for years. The thing that's really cool about this, and it is one of the things that I really highly encourage people to do, is if they feel like they've got trauma that needs to come forward, and it doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter if it's like ritual abuse or anything, it's trauma that's trapped in you. If these thoughts and memories are coming forward, to just get on your phone and like do like a voice recording and just talk it through, and let the emotion be there, all of that stuff, and then go back and listen to it later. And if you want to journal with it, you can, because I believe what this did for me is it actually increased the healing process. Like it really just like shot me forward years of the healing process, instead of just kind of going, I remember this and I'm piecing that, and I think if I put these two together it would make sense, and I was really emotional. Like instead of that, I've got this whole ability to, feel free to express what's going on and then witness myself afterwards. And being your own witness is really powerful. Like,
and that's
from
one
that
of 6
point,
notebooks that you've got.
this is one of 6, yeah, and I still have a few more. So this has been really it's been very, very valuable to me. And I got to the point where I was actually making duplicates, and I was taking them into my therapist so that he had a copy and I had a copy, because the concern was
They would
just
disappear.
them being destroyed, disappeared or whatever. So I've been protecting these guys for
Well, if
no
you need
good
to, you've got a lot of memories there. If you need to refer to your notes, please feel free to do that. When you were 3 and you were eating the sinew,
Mhm.
and were you required to drink the blood as
I
well?
was. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Did you make any sort of parallel in your mind, and knowing that you're 3 and drugged, did you recognize from being in church the connection with the sacrament?
Absolutely, because they're using the same words, take, eat, this is my
Okay.
body, take, drink, this is my blood. You're going to be able to make those comparisons, that crossover. And as you're being, taught, here's the bread, here's the water kind of idea, you're still knowing, and you're still taught on a weekly basis what this is. So what that does is that ceremony in the church, as worshipful as it seems, for anybody that actually has an inverse ceremony and experience with that, they're going to be connected. And this one is going to get driven further and further because of all of the trauma around it. Something that seems pretty kind of innocuous is still validating that happened. It's actually really reinforcing everything. And at this one, you're going to be in a ceremony with the blood and the sinew and the meat and all of that kind of stuff. You're going to be being told things. You're going to be terrorized. You're going to be on drugs. And you're also going to be tortured. So all of that weighs in as far as your body systems go. That has more strength, more weight than just, a 10-minute ceremony in church on a Sunday. Does that make sense?
Yes, there's a lot that's happening spiritually and energetically that we can't see. So when we're sitting as average members taking the sacrament on a Sunday, and we think that the water and the bread is symbolic, there's really, I cover this partly in a video that goes over the esoteric meaning of the sacrament. But what's really happening is there's so much of this energetic nuance that's happening on a spiritual level that really we're anchoring in or supporting the satanic literal ritual of you drinking blood and eating flesh that is said to represent the blood in the body of Christ. Is that correct?
Correct. And this is going to
Okay.
be across the board with other Christian religions, the Catholic Church and such. They're going to be using
The
the
wafer.
the wafer and the wine in the same manner, because this satanic ritual brotherhood is across all the religions. And so whatever, it's kind of like I tell people, I have satanic ritual abuse with the Mormon flair. Like I've got the Mormon twist on it, right?
Right.
So it's going to be using Mormon lore. It's going to be using Mormon songs. It's going to be using Mormon ritual. It's going to be using Mormon language to drive all of that in. It's still hitting and anchoring the same thing in, even though they're worshiping Satan. Lucifer can be present, whatever. So it's a very, very easy crossover,
The symbolism is the same.
100%, 100%. In this case, I was just looking at, I said that they made me hate Christ, because as a follower of Christ, since I ate the body of Christ and drank the blood of Christ, I'm now a follower of Satan. So the wording that was used was that I am one of Satan's, and as soon as I start hearing that language, any discomfort or pain that I was experiencing moments before then is absent. So I would be associating pain, whether it's my stomach that's hurting, or if I'm sitting on a metal disc, they can run electrical bolts through it, which would be also sensory and very, very uncomfortable and painful, especially when they're talking about Jesus. Then you start associating things with Satan and how he really is the God. Then that you get relief, your body will get relief, because that pain will be taken away. Will basically, they'll turn off the switch, or kind of that thing. But you're not aware of that. You just are associating a systemic relax or relief to worshiping Satan, or being one of his member of his followers, over the association with Christ, which is really, really painful.
Is that part of the reason why you call it an inverted process? Because rather than having the love, fulfillment, connection through Christ, now this represents pain, discomfort,
Absolutely.
and you're looking to escape it, and you do that through Satan.
You would be doing, yeah, you're told that's how it's going to happen. And then they prove it through physical experience.
Through physical reinforcement.
Right. And so in this case, as a 3-year-old, I was eating the flesh, drinking the blood, and then chewing on sinew. So, and it went right down to the marrow. Like, they were taking it, the wording was taking it all the way to the marrow and the bone. So there's a full-on consumption of Christ, like nothing's left. It's like his skin, his meat, his flesh. So all of that plus down to the marrow and the bone. And so consuming that is what is done, because it's shown, and it gets shown to me a number of different times that, Satan's the one that actually killed Jesus, that kind of thing. In fact, that's in the baptism, that kind of I'll get to that in a minute, where Satan is actually the one that controls all of this. So anyway, let's see, I want to make sure that I kind of covered that. I know that they, how did I say this? I had to soak on something that it didn't taste good. It was bitter, and it was also drugged. So they've been soaking this like this sinew in something that had been drugged anyway. So chewing on it is also adding and layering different kinds of drugs. And the other thing that happened often was, I might have, or a child may start with a particular drug in their system, whether it's ingested with like ice cream or, a drink or something like that. And then later through, as you are still functioning, you're just kind of dazed and your head's in a cloud and that kind of thing. The dissociation is, like that part's going to understand that, and you're going to begin to dissociate. But at some point when you get into the ceremony, you're going to receive another drugging, whether it's through chewing on something, eating something, or whether you're injected. And they use that a lot too. So it's your alternate drugging state is going to be layered, and it's going to be extended, and it doesn't even have to be the same drug. And so through this experience, and I just want to put this in here, through my experiences of remembering all of this stuff, I recognized really quickly that this blood brotherhood, the church itself, they know more about the layering of drugs and pharmaceuticals than most doctors do. They know what cocktails to put together because of the medical experimentation that has been done on people and was even done on me, and the different uses and the different reactions that have been so well studied. And they experimented, they tested it all the time, that they knew how far they could take a child before they actually, like went schizophrenic or died, or how they could take somebody to death and then shock them back into life. Like that happened to me a few times too. So they know and they understand the body well enough to be able to manipulate that and do that.
Was this ceremony that you had done when you were 3, the one that we're talking about, was this done through your family's network, or was this in conjunction with the church, or it's indistinguishable?
It started with the family, but it wasn't exclusive to the family. I would definitely say it's the network they were involved in. And so in a way, it's indiscernible because they are part of a bigger network. And I guess I distinguish it between family ceremony, which would have been the baby blessing that I was describing, and some family reunions where they were designed specifically to traumatize and condition the children at the reunion, versus a ceremony like this where the network is actually invited and involved. And there's most of the time they're there with robes and hoods and things like that on. So unless I really needed to know who it was that was in charge or speaking, or they're standing by me or whatever, then I got a sense that, if it was a male or a female, and I could sense into it, but I didn't always know who was there.
Right. Plus, you're a drugged small child.
Yeah.
So there's that. So are you ready to talk about your pre-baptism and your baptism through Satanism, and then compare that with your Mormon ordinance?
I can do that for sure.
Okay.
Let's start with the Mormon ordinance again, because the Mormon ones are they're so less detailed.
Okay.
For that one, the child that is going to be getting baptized gets baptized at either, as close to their 8th birthday as possible. When I was growing up, the baptism happened on one Saturday, and if a fast Sunday was like available, like right afterwards, then you would be confirmed on the next day on the Sunday. So it was like the Saturday before the fast Sunday, and on fast Sunday, that's where the child would be confirmed.
In front of the congregation.
In front of the congregation,
right.
Yes. So you would be called up to the front, your dad would be going with you, and then priesthood members would be there, and they all put their hands on your head, and they confirm you a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they say unto you, receive the Holy Ghost. That's when an entity ends up really being assigned to you. And I don't remember there being a blessing past that much, other than being told that Heavenly Father is really proud of me, and just some really short things like that. And then after that was done, then the meeting would continue, and that was basically the testimony Sunday, when members of the congregation can go up and they can actually have their own testimonials about their faith and that kind of thing. So the child is prepared in a way for baptism by the primary teachers and by other members of the ward, and even parents, like, are you excited to get baptized? And it's coming up, and they start building it up for this 8-year-old. And if somebody else is getting baptized and you haven't been baptized yet, they're celebrating that child at the in primary, and they're just making it kind of like this really cool thing that everybody wants to participate in. So when you're asked, as a 7-year-old, do you want to get baptized? Of course, you're not going to see that there's any other option. You're going to say, yeah, I mean, it's been looking pretty fun so far, right? So you're going to have like a white dress or white pants, again, it's all in white, and you're going to be, they have in the buildings, typically the stake center, they're going to have a font. It's below like kind of even below ground, right? So the font, it's symbolic of going down into the waters, you know. So they fill the font, and my dad walked down into the stairs and went down the stairs into this font. And then I was helped down the stairs into the water. And then the ceremony basically is he raises his arm to the square and then baptizes me in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And then you're immersed in the water and then brought back up. So that's
for those viewers who do not have an LDS background, the font is a giant bathtub, which is filled with warm water. And I remember being pretty excited to get in that thing, because it was like a little mini swimming pool.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say, I mean, everybody, honestly, I would say the majority of people that are attending this baptism are also supporting your own kind of excitement. Like, what does this mean? I'm going to get baptized. I'm going to receive the Holy Ghost. Like, it's really framed in a way where it's a privilege, and it's awesome, and it's great, and you're going to be a member, and all of these things are, you know, these words that are told to you that you don't necessarily know how to relate to, but everybody's very supportive of this. And so
you're an official member.
There you go.
An official member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So now it's almost like a milestone that you're looking forward to, because really you're told that that's what's supposed to happen, and there really is no other choice. You can't doubt.
Yeah, there's not, especially as an 8-year-old, you don't necessarily look around it and say, well, you know, let me consider this a little longer to see if this is what I want to be a part of. That kind of, you know, thinking is
not an option.
Predominant, exactly. But the thing that I was trying to bring forward is that people are there and they're very supportive, and so you're seeing a lot of smiling faces, and there is a really good spirit there, and there's a party afterwards most times. Family's been invited, they're going to have dinner, we're going to, you know, like the whole thing. It is a celebration. Same thing with the baby blessing. As soon as the baby blessing's over, after that, on that Sunday, there's a big dinner, all the family comes, and, you know, it's just a big family gathering. So there's a lot of real positive things on the surface for what that is. And then again, it's also, you know, like really, really anchoring in these deeper ceremonies. And so for me, on my baptism, it was a group ceremony. So there were, I think it's 6 girls. There were 6 of us with our dads, and it was a very lengthy ceremony too. So it was pre-baptism, and we weren't necessarily told that that's what was going to be happening to us. That's just where the ceremony led us. But in this first part, as a child, you know, 7-year-old, I remember I'm getting close to my birthday. I'm getting close to this baptism, like, you know, event. And the setup is this: the girls are brought in, and we are in a drug state, and we keep hearing that the words that are being told to us are, don't disappoint him, don't fail him, he's all you have, you'll be left alone, don't disappoint him, he's here to save you, he's here to love you, and if you don't have him, there's nobody there that's going to love you, there's no one there to turn to, and you just as well kill yourself. So this was all focused on our dads. Like, this was to give us, you know, really instill loyalty to our handlers, who were our dads at this, you know, with this group. And then there was this, we were standing in a circle or semicircle, and there was this group of hooded figures, and the man in the middle was in red and everybody else was in black. And basically the man that was speaking, the one that was in charge, was saying, your dad is bringing you here so that you can learn things. You're going to learn what life is really about, and you can trust him, and you'll want to come here again, and you'll want to come back. So they're planting in these desires. They're telling us what's going to be happening. You can trust him, and you'll want to come here again. We need you. And if you let him down, you let us down. There are so many people counting on you.
Is this part of the pre-baptism ceremony?
Yeah, this is the
Okay.
pre-baptism ceremony. So in this drug state, I personally was feeling like there's something really special, like there's a prize for me if I come back. That's just the way it's being painted. I don't know what come back means. I just know I'm going to be rewarded if I come back.
Okay.
And so then after that, there then commences like a sexual conditioning. So then the fathers start touching their daughters in very sexualized and sexual ways and very penetrating ways. And what this is doing is it's stimulating, the child, like it was stimulating me to where soft touch, soft caress, that kind of thing, so that my body is actually beginning to respond. And I'm making associations with my dad and the situation and the words that were just told me, and my desire to not disappoint him and not let him down, which means I'm not going to let them down. So the grooming in that way was really intensified. It was like,
So now
it
you're
was
pleasing him
there. And
in
then
this
he
way.
also said, or the man in the main guy was saying, you want to make him happy. And so then during this, as my dad was getting very close to me and whispering in my ear and kissing me and stuff like that, then he began to tell me what would make him happy. If I was like quiet and I don't make any noise, that would make him happy, like in this ceremony. So I'm not going to scream or like struggle. And then if I would obey, then that would also make him happy. So things that would be, like I would relatively understand, even though I was very uncomfortable and everything in me was feeling like, I don't like this. This is gross. Yeah. But I'm still drugged and I'm still hearing this and all of this is going on. And so then we begin to have this relationship, like this bonding that's going on. And then the man that was in charge of it, the men that were in charge of it were telling us that they would take our dads away if we didn't stay loyal to him dad, and him the cult. And so there was a very real sexualizing and heightening of different senses that was going on. And then after that, I know that this happened to all of the girls, but they did it individually. So I was then taken into a room that felt very much like a dungeon. Like it was just really dark. It was hard to see, but I could see. Mm-hmm. I was walking, it smelled like blood, and I was walking past a bunch of severed heads on the floor. And I couldn't quite make it out, but then I was starting to actually see that there are these heads on the floor.
Wait, were they skulls, or were they just like bloody heads?
They were just bloody heads. And so I was told that these were people that had given their life for me. Now, as much as they have access to all of this, they also have access to faults and like just, makeup, the Hollywood stage stuff, right? So because the lights were so dim, it was highly possible and probable that a lot of those heads, if maybe not all of those heads, were fake, and that they had been created and mutilated, and like blood in the hair and that kind of thing, and distorted looks on their face, created specifically to cause the trauma and the terror. But it's not necessarily a human head, because then they could reuse them over and over, right? So
through the course of your ritual abuse, they've used real heads, they've used fake heads in a small child who's drugged. Mm-hmm. It would be very difficult to differentiate which is real and which is not.
You can't. Okay. You can't differentiate. And there would even be animal heads. So even that could be created or real. It just depends. I know that in this ceremony, it was I was very aware that there was an awful lot of blood, because this was going to be a baptism. So they had me step into like a big basin, like a very large basin that could be used for almost anything, but I was standing in it and I was naked. And basically they took a big pitcher. They had a big pitcher of blood, and they started to pour it like on my shoulders, around my back to my other shoulder. And then they started pouring it all the way around me. So it was like having like a shroud on. And what they called it, they called it like a mantle. And so then they started referring to the heads, and they were saying that this blood that's being poured on me is the blood of my family, meaning my cult family, right? And it could be my family too. Like they would allow my interpretation to be whatever it was going to be, however terrified I wanted to make it, right? So this could be like family members, right? And these are generations past of people that have given their blood for this ceremony for me. But then I was also told that the sins of these people was also in their blood. And now that it's being poured on me, that I carry those sins, and that it is my job to carry the sins of these family members to, carry them on my shoulders, so that I have this sense of responsibility to the cult, so that I would not abandon the cult, and that I would continue returning again. So now there's a prize if you come back, and there's a responsibility to stay and to come back. So they were saying, like, the blood surrounds you, you wear it, and it can never be removed. And then what they had me do is they had me put my palms out in front of me like this. And then as I did that, then one of the men, like the main guy doing the ceremony, put his thumb in like a little dish of blood. And then he put it on my palm, and then he put his hand back on this other side, and he squeezed really, really hard. It hurt. It was like a pinch. And he was saying that the thumbprint of the blood is where Christ's nails, the prints of the nails would be.
Yeah.
And he was inferring, and he said, not even this, meaning the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, not even this can save you. So they were enforcing like the hand sign, but they were also saying that it's theirs. And they were saying that any sacrifice that Jesus has made, how people like utilize, he sacrificed himself for you, and here's the, marks in his palms, that that couldn't penetrate this, that this ceremony and this blood was stronger than that, than what Jesus did to sacrifice himself in that way. And then he said, by pain of death, the sword will pierce you too. And then what they did is there's a symbol, there's a sign that they do where, starting on the left side, where Jesus was stabbed, right? It's starting on the left side, kind of low behind the ribs. And then they did this upward motion. Mm-hmm. This upward motion is symbolizing the fact that by pain of death, the sword would also kill me if I don't come back and if I'm not loyal to them. And so basically what they were saying to me is, he didn't give up his life, that the sword took it. So Jesus never offered his life to the world. The sword is what took his life instead of, him giving it. And that Satan actually killed him. And he could have killed Jesus as a baby, because he was, kind of as an infant, helpless that way. But Satan gave permission for Jesus to live. And then at the crucifixion, he caused him to suffer because he could, and then Satan took his life as he was suffering on the cross. And then Satan also allowed Jesus to rise again, because he's in charge of this whole thing. And so as I'm having this experience happen to me, and these words are being told to me, the evidence of this is actually kind of going in further and further. It's like, well, Jesus isn't showing up and he's not saving me, but these guys are certainly like really skilled at what they're doing. So then after that, then they poured blood in my hands, and then they said that I could not wash off the blood. It's blood from family generations that have given it. And then I own that. And then I'm supposed to carry it, or they're going to kill me like they killed Christ by pain of the sword. And that I have to keep these secrets, the family secrets, meaning the cult family secrets. I have to keep those secrets because of their sacrifice and because of that's just what this whole baptism is about. And then what they did is they brought in a crown of thorns and they put it on my head. And this crown of thorns had it actually had a little blood packet like in it, close to it.
Oh, yeah.
So that when they put it on my head and they pushed it down, it punctured like this little bag that was down in there. And I know that just the way I was actually getting the memories, I could see it. But in the moment, I didn't realize that. I thought it was my blood because I could feel it scratching my head. And it was super painful, actually. But they pushed that down on me. And then they started telling me that my blood is now mingling with their blood, and that we are one now with the same blood. And they basically, let's see, the words were, let your blood join with our blood so that we may be one. And then there was more that was coming out because I could feel it running down my face. And so the whole trauma about being baptized in this manner was also hearing that this blood, this ceremony, could never be washed away. So they did this before my water baptism in the church, because when that baptism happened and they say that you're washed clean of your sins, it's already been established that that won't work for me. So that's keeping me in that power right there. And then after that, then there was like a follow-up with even more of how I am now part of that family of the cult, and that my responsibility is always to stay loyal and to not tell the secrets. And I know that they actually went through and they did this with each of the girls. Then there was like a post-baptism ceremony, and that goes into some other things too. So this baptism happened right in the middle of it, where we are actually just, baptized to the cult, to Satan, and that the blood of Christ means nothing. Like, it's not that.
I would imagine that part of the reason why you were required to have a water baptism through the church is for peripheral reasons. Your neighbors,
Absolutely.
your ward members are going to expect that. But it's
Not
just,
only that, so am I. Like, it would be a little
yeah.
disturbing to me as an 8-year-old if everybody else is getting baptized and I'm not. I'm a member of the church. So like, I'm going to be going through, the families that are part of this cult are going to be doing all the similar ceremonies, celebrating and getting excited about all of those things for sure. But yeah, it's not only so that the neighbors or for other ward members to not notice anything. It is another ceremony that really drives in your loyalty to the church itself. So not only are you loyal to the brotherhood because of all of this trauma, I'm going to be loyal to the church. I'm a baptized member, and then also, go ahead.
Any of those 6 girls that went through this ritual with you, were they part of your ward? Did you know them outside of your satanic family?
I rarely knew anybody in any of the ceremony.
Okay.
I've identified a couple of people a few times, because in one case it was like they were family friends. It was just kind of weird. Like, that one was kind of weird for me because it's like, I know you, but I don't know how I know you. You know what I mean? It was this
Yeah,
strange.
I would imagine. So when you are going through the LDS ordinances and you see your friends in primary getting baptized, did you know that or did you have any sort of inkling that maybe they had had a blood ritual as well, or did you just
No,
none of
no, I
those
mean,
thoughts ever occurred to you?
none of those thoughts ever occurred to me because I wasn't accessing. I had compartmentalized and repressed the trauma memories so well because of the training that they ensure that happens, that I didn't look at any of these baptisms as anything other than what I was watching them to be. So it wasn't triggering to me or anything like that. But I do know somebody that was, my baptism was not, I don't remember it being in the temple. I actually think it was in the Cathedral of the Madeleine, to be honest. But I do know somebody who had a blood baptism in the font in the Provo Temple. And so that would also be something that would be potentially a little alarming or a lot alarming to him when he was a youth and he would go do baptisms for the dead. But then there's also the way that font is set up with all of the cattle, like they do use animal blood also in this. Like in mine, there was a man that owned a pig farm and would when he would slaughter the pigs, like he would keep the blood, and he was like, there was a lot of pig blood that was used in ceremonies that I was associated with because of the need for copious amounts of blood is what I just, so even when I was, like I had that crown of thorns, like, yeah, I may have gotten a scratch and maybe something would have dripped down my face, but the amount of blood that was coming down onto me and was later poured over me, that was not mine. But when you're in that state and they're telling you that your blood is mingling with theirs, blood, in that state, blood's blood, like it's all there. And I had just been told that I'm looking at the severed heads of generations and of people that have given all of this blood for me in this ceremony. I'm not gonna like try and figure it out or think of it differently than how it's being told to me. So,
and then I would imagine because of the disassociated state, you repress it, you push it back,
100%.
and you carry on with your life.
Right. And then when I turned 8 years old, after this was before the water baptism, but this was like after the blood baptism, my dad needed to seal up or finish up the ceremony. And so he woke me up at 3 a.m. and he had created like an altar downstairs, and everybody else in the family was asleep. They were drugged. He made sure that everybody had something to, have them sleep through this ceremony. So it was just me and him, and I was in a really woozy state too. I just didn't get as big of a dose, I guess. But anyway, he had taken me downstairs, and he had this little traveling ceremony skin. It was like I thought it was maybe a deer skin, and it had a pentagram on it, and he had candles, white candles. These were white candles that he had dipped in blood, and then I could, he had lit them, and then I could see the blood kind of going down that. And he was just saying that he was like finishing or sealing up the baptism commitment that had been made. So the blood of my ancestors were being sealed on my birthday in this ceremony between he and I. And it was like I had to offer blood too. So he cut my finger and he cut his finger, and again, the blood mingling kind of thing. And I am his, he is mine, all this one ceremony, which goes back to the pre-baptism of staying loyal to your dad, your father. And he was my main handler too. So it was all of a lot of grooming that just kind of culminated into this particular ceremony, but really just followed me through my whole life. Like when your handler is in these ceremonies, and part of the languaging that's so important to the mind control, it's pretty hard to actually know that and recall that unless you actually go back and get the memories and get the words and see what that's all about. So, wow. But that's that's typical. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. And with those ceremonies, the pre-baptism, the baptism with through the Satanic network, and then your Mormon ritual / ordinance, that's a lot in a short period of time. And I know that this has been a lot of graphic information for the audience. It's important, I think, we understand exactly what these individuals have been through, because you were by far and away not alone.
No.
Right. So what I'm hoping we can do is have you end on a positive note. Tell us something that's been uplifting for you, healing for you.
I've got to bring this in. So you saw my book. I've got all of these, terrifying memories. But I also, as I was reading over this, there were so many times that I could, even then, even though I couldn't express it then because of being so subdued, I could see through the lies of it. And there were so many times that I knew my heart was dedicated to God and to light and to truth, and how I was able to kind of not only distinguish that, but then start recognizing that I did see and did experience Jesus, and I did have that support, and that there were actual times that he did come to me, and he did say, give me instructions, and did say, you know what, you're capable and you can do this. And I was really aware through this whole thing that there's a lot of, well, I don't know that this is going to be easy for people to hear, but I did choose this. I chose in because the success on the outside is something like what we're doing here, where I can expose and I can help educate, and just the power of God, the power that Jesus has, the power of light and truth really is still present.
No
It's
werewolf teeth,
in
right?
all of us. Say no
No
scary teeth.
werewolf teeth.
The werewolf teeth. Yeah, exactly. But it's within all of us, right? This light of Christ, this light of God is present. And the more people, victims and survivors that I talk to, one of the most consistent things that I do hear is that that God spark is deeply protected. And I believe that is what evil is actually after. It's trying to get to that unending, like, wellspring source of power. And they can't. Like, what switches and what shifts is your mind, and then also, their work on you being a soulless body. But that God spark is there. Like, it's pretty impressive. Accessing it might take a lot, for you, especially if you have all of these layers. But I want to put that out there just because if somebody is actually in a place where they feel really, really hopeless, that's not of God. And there is something to have hope in. And your own strength is pretty astounding. Your journey may be not so astounding at the moment, but it's still worth all of the effort that you put into really coming back into really self-actualizing and being sovereign, whatever that takes. So I'm hoping that's encouraging. I know
You
that I
say
saw,
that is the creation of life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've had a lot of experiences where I've seen it from a number of different ways, and I can attribute that in every one of them. Yeah.
What a wonderful note to end on.
Well, thanks. It's good.
I hope you guys have enjoyed today's interview with Asia. Feel free to reach out with your questions and your comments. I am watching them, and I know Asia is reading them. We will answer whatever we can. I am going to list Asia's contact information in the description notes, so you can find her on Facebook. You have a podcast, Letters to the People, correct?
Correct.
All right, excellent. So I will include all of that. I thank you again, and you can reach me at galacticstoryteller@gmail.com, and we'll see you in the next video.